Hello, I hope you're doing good. My name is Dr. Malini Kazi. This week, our discussion will focus on the topic of designing learner experience. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. So, designing for learner experience, we are starting to see some trends in higher education. The first trend in higher education for recent years is that the higher education context in the US is at a tipping point due to the following reasons. First, enrollment change. The enrollment changed from the traditional, the traditional is declining. And when I say traditional here, I mean the face-to-face model of learning. Now, this is changing to online. So, online student number is growing while the traditional face-to-face enrollment is declining. The second trend is that the shift in student demographic. So in the recent year, we see that there is an increase in racial and ethnic diversity. So the number of white students which used to be dominant in higher education is kind of declining, while the number of students of color is increasing. Yes, it is white students who are still dominant in the higher education, but their number is not growing as the student of color. I'm talking here of Black student and Hispanic and also Asian students. So that is another trend in higher education. Another trend is that there is a continuity rise in college tuition. And this brings concern for students to look for options for affordability, flexibility, and convenience, as well as relevance programs to their needs. So students are seeking ways and also programs which can be affordable. So as the result, the online model of learning is now being um, a choice for many students because they can at least reduce the cost of attending college education because they can study from home. So that means they won't need to like pay for hostel. Also, they won't pay for maybe commuting to the university to attend the classes. So that brings less cost to them. So, but also the online option is flexible. They see that because they can register online, they can attend and participate in learning um, in at their convenience time. You see, that is flexibility and convenience as well. But another trend is that there is an increase of workforce need for new skills. So it's like people who are already employed and working, they want to gain new skills while they still maintain their jobs. So the online model of learning or of studying is an option to these people who want to gain new skills while still maintaining their jobs. But also, the learning ecosystem currently in higher education is dynamic. It's dynamic and this means that dynamic situation has been caused by some factors. One of those factors includes emerging technology, which have influenced how people think and behave in learning environment. So you see that learning is now becoming a part of a big dynamic digital ecosystem where learning occurs anywhere and anytime. And as such, learning is no longer to happen only in a classroom. It can happen anywhere. And there was a big shift, actually an abrupt shift to online learning, as we know, during the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. So because all schools were pushed to online learning, that trend has been continuing. So after the pandemic, still people now they are still preferring to take their study online. Another reason for the dynamic learning ecosystem is new digital learning environment which integrates content, technology, and people in an institutional culture. So you see now you have, because of the technology, there are digital learning environments. I'm talking here of learning management systems which can help to provide learning online where content is available for students to learn, and where instructors also can use the technology to manage instructional for classes. Another factor for the dynamic ecosystem is that learners have an easy access to experts. Talking here of access to instructors who facilitate their learning through communicating via emails or maybe through video conferencing technology such as Zoom and WebEx, as well as Team and Google Meet. So that brings an easy access to the expert. Another factor is that now instructors take on multiple roles in learning. For example, instructors can be learning designer, but also they can be evaluator, observer, and also supporter who supports learning for students. Now, let us also see another concept here. Mind shift in designing learning. Mindset shift in designing learning. So mindset shift for designing learning, it has been shifted from the traditional designing for traditional learning to designing for online learning. Another shift is that there is now a new way of thinking about the learner environment and also learning interaction due to the changes which has happened recently. So instructors as well as course a designer or instructional designer are thinking differently about learners in learning environment and the interaction within the learning environment, as you will see um, as we go on with our discussion. But also another mindset shift is the emphasis on how learners respond cognitively, emotionally, and behavioral, as well as socially. So there is an increased emphasis for instructional designers to consider when designing learning, to consider how learners respond to content cognitively and as well as emotionally, so that those are things now which are being considered. Formerly, the focus would be only on cognitive, designing to meet the cognitive needs, but now there is an emphasis to balance all these dimensions of learning, talking of cognitive dimension, emotional, behavioral, and social dimensions. Another mindset shift is the emphasis for learner-centered approach versus focused approach. Now there is an emphasis for instructional designers to design learning while focusing more on learners than the content. So the purpose here is to make the learner to be the center of the designing process, learning design process. Another mindset shift is open mind and exploratory attitude toward using innovative technology. So now instructors as well as instructional designers, they are designing learning with an open mind to allow different ways of presenting content, different ways of designing, and different ways to make learning effective. So let us talk more about the learner-centered approach. Learner-centered approach has been a major focus in educational psychology since in the 1990s. And learner-centered principle focus on designing learning from learner's perspective. So the designing process will consider more the learner perspective. So looking at things from the learner's perspective instead of looking at the learning process from the instructor perspective. The principles which guide learner-centered view learner and the learning process as a holistically process. So you cannot separate learner and the learning process. It is something which it is intertwined, so that when considering designing for learning, you should consider learners as key element in that process. Learning environment. Now, learning environments interacts with numerous learners' internal factors. So for this approach, they see that the learning environment involves a lot of numerous learner internal factors such as cognitive, affective, social, and other individual differences. All those things need to be factored in when planning or designing for instruction. The purpose of learner-centered principle is to make sure that there is an improvement for student learning outcome and satisfaction. So is to make sure that students are learning effectively, are achieving the expected learning outcomes, and they are satisfied with their learning process. Learner-centered approach also emphasize using principles which ensure greater connection and empathy with the learner at multiple levels, such as intellectual, emotional, social, and behavioral. Online learning is viewed as less personal. So people who are critic of online learning, they say that online learning is less personal. Hence, there is a need for more learner engagement. So more effort to ensure learner engagement is needed when designing for online learning, because the reason is that learners in the online learning feel disconnected because they are not in close proximity with their instructor and other students. So the need to design for activities which can really help learners to interact with instructor, with other learners, as well as content. Now, because online context present constraints on how learner interact with the instructor, content, and other learners, it is very important to consider potential solutions to improve engagement and interaction in the online learning environment. Now, how can we design for online environment? Designing of online environment. New technology and media have given rise to the next generation digital learning environment, which support blended and online learning. The abundance of technology may lead to making some online learning environment overly technology focused, because sometimes instructor or instructional designers can be tempted to focus more on technology than on making effective learning activities which can help learners to achieve their intended learning outcomes. Some online learning environments have been criticized for being overly technology-centric. Technology-centric approaches begins by focusing on the features and functionalities of new technology, then finding ways they can be used to transmit subject matter. So you see, this focus on technology first, then on how you can use that technology to transmit subject matter, is something which ignore the importance of the learner or even the subject content. So normally it would be expected that the focus should be on the learner, how technology can be used to help learners learn effectively. So successful online learning environment should start with the focus on the learner. Learner experience designing. Designing online learning has much in common and much to learn from user experience. Now, the field of user experience, in the field of user experience, the term experience not only means creating a functional, effective, and usable product, but also it means that creating an overall positive and a memorable experience, user experience. To have a learner experience, then, learners are deeply invested in the cognitive, emotional, social, and behavioral levels. Learner experience design is at the intersection of experience design and learner-centered design. It aims to engage learners at a deeper and more personal level as participants in learning process. Now, to have a learner experience, learners are deeply invested in cognitive and emotional level, as well as behavioral, as I said. The designing of impactful learning environment is an attractive goal for instructors and course designer, but in practice, it is not fully implemented. Common design strategies for online courses rely on learning management systems. We are talking of systems like Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle, and so on. However, many learning management systems encourage more content-centered, like one-size-fits-all design than learner-centered. Learning experience design insists on learner-centered values and principles in aspect of online course design, such as user interface, content presentation, learning activities, and assessment, feedback, as well as social interaction. So these are aspects of online learning which need to be considered while instructional designer or instructors are designing or planning learning for online courses. The definition of learning experience design. Learning experience design deals with the structure and psychodynamic of individuals and groups' experience in a learning environment. Learning experience design is a process and also is a set of principles that involves creating technology mediated online learning interactions at the course level as well as lesson and activity level. Learning experience is a holistic, which means it integrates the cognitive, emotional, social, and behavioral dimension of learning. I will talk more about these dimensions of learning. Cognitive. When we talk of cognitive dimension of learning, we are talking of mental activities and processes such as perception, memory, reasoning, classification, problem solving, and so on. And the dimension of emotional deals with learners' motivation, when learning is encouraging and they are motivated to learn, but also it deals with feeling of frustration even confusion when learning is not going the way they expected, or if they are confused by maybe the challenging content they are given, or any reason which makes them feel uncomfortable in learning environment. So emotional dimension, it includes basically their feelings, be it feelings of joy, feelings of frustration, or any kind of feeling. Social dimension. This deals with relationship between individuals in the learning environments. So you're talking of student-instructor interaction, student-student interaction. So that is social. How do they interact, and how that interaction help learners to learn effectively. Behavioral dimension. This is now an extension and internalization and application of the cognitive, emotional, and social dimension. So the emotional dimension is like an avenue for them to implement what they have learned at cognitive dimension, emotional, and social. So behavior is shaped by individuals' thinking, feelings, and social interactions. Core concept of learner experience design. One of the core concepts in learner experience design is learner-centered. In the learning experience design, there is a greater emphasis on learner-centered design, contrary to instructor and content-centered, which used to be that way in past years. Now, this view is all about viewing all aspects of learning environment from the learner's perspective. Another core concept in designing learner experience is emotional and cognitive design versus cognitive design only. This means that now, in designing for effective learner experience, we need to recognize the deep connection between the various dimensions of learning, not only to think of cognitive dimension. Another concept is making learning to be participatory rather than making design to be participatory rather than just one person designing and assuming that what it has been designed will be suitable for all learners. The learner experience emphasizes the participation of many stakeholders in designing the learning environment and designing instruction as well. It also encourages receiving inputs and feedbacks from multiple stakeholders so that the learning experience can be improved or adjusted to meet the learner's need. Designing also in this in the learning experience design, it encourages using design thinking. Now, when we talk of design thinking, we are talking of things like problem-solving mindset to develop innovative learning environment. Now, here are strategies for integrating design thinking. One of the strategy of integrating design thinking in designing learner experience is to emphasize with learners. And this strategy is about always keeping the learner's perspective in mind by asking or by thinking of things like caring about the learner's experience, also being curious about how learners are thinking, feeling about their learning experience. Also, making conversations with learners to better understand their course experience or learning experience. And another way of empathizing with learners is to changing the course design based on learners' need and feedback. So these 4 things here are also considered 4 C's, which help to emphasize with learners. This is one of the strategy of integrating design thinking. Another strategies includes defining design challenge. This can be done by conducting research, observing activities, and also collecting inputs from stakeholders. Another strategy is ideate and brainstorm. A variety of potential solutions on how to address the learning design challenge. And this involves collaboration with other stakeholders or other instructor and designers. Another strategy is prototype ideas by making 1 or 2 best potential solutions more tangible through mock-up, visual narratives, and showing a solution that will work. And still more strategy here is testing solutions by refining prototypes, design, and returning to learner and other stakeholders for validation and final design. This is kind of testing whatever it has been designed so that you can get feedback from other stakeholders, including learners. And finally, another strategy is implementing the final design, ensuring that people, technology, and process are working properly. Now, these strategies are also considered as elements of design thinking or steps of design thinking. So that is it for now regarding designing learner experience. Thank you so much for your attentiveness. And if you have question, then you can email me and I'll be happy to respond to your questions. This is the reference. This presentation is based on a book by these 2 guys. This is the title of the book is Designing the Online Learning Experience, Evidence-Based Principles and strategies. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.